Thousands of years ago, in the fertile land of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, people started noticing a strange natural phenomenon. A foul-smelling, black, sticky liquid was seeping directly out of cracks in the earth. It didn't behave like water, and initially nobody knew what to make of it. But human curiosity took over. The ancient Sumerians soon figured out that this substance, a natural form of asphalt, repelled water. They began painting it on their wooden boats to make them watertight, allowing for longer, safer trade routes down the rivers. Not long after, the Babylonians started using it as a heavy mortar to reinforce their brick buildings. By the time this substance reached ancient Egypt, its purpose shifted. The Egyptians incorporated this natural bitumen into their preservation process for the dead. In fact, the Arabic word for this substance is mumia, which is where we get the English word mummy. In the Sichuan region of China, people were driving long, hollow bamboo pipes deep into the ground to extract this dark liquid and its accompanying gas for heat and light. Meanwhile, in ancient Persia, armies were soaking their arrows in the combustible liquid to set enemy fortresses on fire. Humans were waterproofing ships, fortifying their cities, and winning wars with this substance. Yet through all of this, ancient civilizations were standing directly above the massive, hidden reservoirs that would later power the planet. If you ask most people today where that buried energy comes from, they'll tell you it's melted down dinosaurs. But the real story starts hundreds of millions of years before the first dinosaur even existed. Between 300 and 400 million years ago, trillions of microscopic marine organisms, like algae and plankton, lived, died, and drifted down into the silt. Century after century, their remains were buried under heavy layers of sand and clay. Pushed deeper into the Earth's crust, these biological remains were subjected to intense heat and crushing pressure. Slowly, they cooked into a dense, waxy material that scientists call kerogen. As the temperature continued to rise past 60 degrees Celsius, that kerogen broke down into a dark, energy-dense liquid, crude oil. Because oil is lighter than water, it migrates upward through porous rock layers. It keeps moving until it collides with a thick, impenetrable ceiling of hard rock. Trapped, the liquid pools into massive, pressurized subterranean reservoirs. The Earth spent nearly 400 million years quietly burying, crushing, and cooking this biological matter into liquid energy. Humanity was about to extract it, commodify it, and burn through it in a fraction of a millisecond of geological time. By the mid-19th century, Europe and America were in the grip of the Industrial Revolution. Cities were growing, and people needed a reliable way to light their homes and streets. At the time, they relied heavily on whale oil, but aggressive overhunting was making whales scarce and their oil expensive. The world needed a cheaper fuel. In 1846, a Canadian geologist named Abraham Gessner synthesized a clean-burning liquid fuel from crude oil. He called it kerosene. Suddenly, a massive market for oil existed, if anyone could find enough of it to meet the demand. In 1859, a retired railway worker named Edwin Drake arrived in Titusville, Pennsylvania, with a radical idea. Instead of wandering around hoping to find oil seeping out of the ground, he actively drilled down to find the source. With his 69-foot strike, Drake proved that humanity could deliberately pull energy from the earth on demand. Within months, thousands of prospectors flooded Pennsylvania, turning quiet farmland into a chaotic industrial zone. The early days of the oil rush were pure chaos. Supply would randomly skyrocket, crashing the price, and then dry up entirely, bankrupting companies overnight. John D. Rockefeller watched this financial bloodbath and saw a path to stability. He realized that while drilling was a gamble, the real power lay in the refining process, turning raw crude into a standardized, usable product. Rockefeller used his growing volume of oil to secure secret, heavily discounted shipping rates from the major railway companies. Because his transport costs were a fraction of what his competitors paid, he could sell his kerosene at a lower price, forcing rival refineries into bankruptcy and then buying up their facilities. By 1870, he consolidated his empire into Standard Oil, soon controlling nearly 90% of refined oil in the United States, turning Rockefeller into the wealthiest private citizen in history. Rockefeller rewrote the rules of energy. He showed that economic dominance doesn't belong to the person who discovers a resource, but to the person who builds a chokehold on its distribution. Just as Standard Oil saturated the market for illumination, electricity began replacing kerosene lamps. But oil found a new market. In 1886, German engineer Carl Benz built a successful vehicle powered by an internal combustion engine, shifting oil's primary job from generating light to creating motion. Henry Ford then expanded the market even further. By launching the Model T in 1908 and perfecting the assembly line, Ford made cars affordable for the working public. Millions of horses were rapidly replaced by internal combustion engines. As transport trucks moved goods, buses carried workers, and tractors planted food, oil became the required fuel for every sector of the modern economy. With the global fleet of internal combustion engines multiplying, a terrifying question emerged. Where was the world going to find enough crude oil to keep this machinery running? The answer triggered a massive geopolitical shift. Expeditions uncovered monumental oil discoveries deep beneath the Middle Eastern deserts. First in Iran in 1908, and then, after years of dry holes, a colossal strike in Saudi Arabia in 1938 at Dammam Well No. 7. Initially, American and British companies signed heavily skewed contracts to extract the crude and keep the majority of the profits. But the host nations realized that the booming Western economies physically could not function without the liquid buried under their sand. In 1960, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Venezuela formed an alliance called OPEC. Their goal was to take sovereign control of their own natural resources, coordinate how much oil they pumped, and dictate the price on the global market. The formation of OPEC moved the ultimate leverage away from the industrialized nations burning the fuel, placing it squarely in the hands of the nations pulling it out of the ground. That leverage was finally deployed in 1973. During a conflict in the Middle East, Arab oil-producing nations slashed their production and cut off supply to Western countries that supported Israel. The global fallout was immediate. With the tap restricted, the world experienced skyrocketing prices, severe inflation, paralyzed supply chains, and panicked citizens waiting in mile-long lines just to buy a few gallons of fuel. Compare that modern, paralyzing panic to the ancient Sumerians calmly smearing a bit of natural bitumen onto a wooden boat. The substance hadn't changed at all, but our reliance on it had reached a total extreme. Oil gave humanity a new scale of speed, light, and industry. But it also proved that when a civilization builds its entire existence on one specific resource, that resource becomes both its greatest engine for progress and its ultimate fatal vulnerability.